Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. Got Ben Burgis back here today. Of course, the philosopher and leftist, or I don't know what word you would actually apply to yourself politically. What word would you apply? Leftist, socialist, progressive, something like that.
Yeah, all
Okay.
three of those are fine. I probably like the last one the least, just because it's used so broadly, it's almost meaningless.
Right. Yeah, for sure. All right. And so we're going to talk about, as many people know, your debate that you recently did with the famous conservative political commentator from Turning Points USA, Charlie Kirk, who is a self-proclaimed populist, apparently. And we're also going to talk about some of that cancel culture stuff, the recent examples to do with Dave Chappelle and R. Kelly. Like I was saying before we started, I thought that was a really great debate, and you did you made really convincing points, to the point that you kind of convinced me towards a few more left-wing ideas than I was before, I would say. And I think you did a really good job of sticking to the points whenever he was starting to kind of change the subject. And I think you did a really good job of explaining statistics in a nuanced way too, because usually, like minimum wage, for example, that you went into, people either say minimum wage good or minimum wage bad, and it's just that simple, and they don't get into any nuance about it. So to start off with, what was confusing about why he called himself a populist to you? Because I find that confusing too, and I think you did a good job of pointing out that the policies he support doesn't really support like the people that populists claim to support.
Yeah, I mean, this is not unique to Charlie Kirk. This is a big pivot that a lot of American right wingers, Republicans basically have done in the last year or two, I think, especially, right? So, kind of comes out of the Trump presidency, but like there's been a big, a lot of it's happened like even more recently than that. So, Donald Trump himself is obviously one of the main examples of of a conservative who really likes to posture about being a populist, but there are also people like Josh Hawley or J.D. Vance, who Charlie Kirk is really into. He's interviewed him a few times, or even like, and this is where it gets particularly weird to me, like even people like Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio, a lot of them, will play this game that they'll start to call themselves populists now. They'll use the word corporate as an insult, that like I've seen Ted Cruz, say like, complain about, the corporate media, like he's a guest on Democracy Now! In 2005. It's bizarre. But, and so when the people who set up the debate, the town circle, when we were talking about doing something like this, when they suggested Charlie Kirk as somebody I could do it with, I've got to admit, my first reaction was, I don't know why, right? Like what, why him, right? And it seemed kind of random. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized I actually did want to debate Charlie Kirk specifically because of this point that, like, because he has done this pivot, where he calls himself a populist, he says he's not like one of those old, corporate Republicans, all this stuff. And even though, like everybody else that I just mentioned, I mean, he's just a pure Reaganite, in his actual policy preferences. And I think this is a point that's really worth making, right? Like, I think, I think from a sort of robustly leftist perspective, I was talking about this the other day on, my friend Jason Miles co-hosts a podcast with Pascal Rivera called This is Revolution. I was on that like a week ago, and I think this is the post game. We're talking about this, like, basically my view of like politics, or at least the part of politics you can do anything about from a media perspective, from a kind of robustly leftist perspective in 2021. The like two front war is like one sort of showing why the sort of like woke progressive version of social justice that really seems to just be about like diversifying the ruling class is not the way we should think about justice and fairness. And then the other is going after these people, because of course they wouldn't be doing this if they didn't think that like obviously it's like what their base wanted, right? That they that like is this kind of rebranded exercise because there's so much anger right now, at elites, kind of screwing people over. And so it's not surprising they talk this way, but it's like amazing that they can get away with this because, like even before, people had a chance to watch the debate, there was this like 2.5 week gap, between when we actually recorded it and when it was put out, just because the schedule of, how they did it, which is like, a million years of YouTube time. But in that time, I was telling people even like, look, I have no idea what anybody else is going to think about this when they watch it, how I did or whatever, but like, whatever else you want to say about this, I think it's a win that like for the main hour, like there was a sort of post-game hour after that where, we got into a much bigger array of subjects, but like for the main hour, just the fact that he had to give me these like spend the hour giving me these like Wall Street Journal editorial pages arguments against, raising the minimum wage and giving everybody health care and, making it easier to join unions, like I think is a win just in and of itself, because like those are like the least populist policy positions you could possibly have.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that and I think another thing that kind of like annoyed me because it's a pet peeve of mine is that he was using all these philosophers' names and these fancy philosophical terms, even though like I don't have a degree in philosophy like you, but I read lots of philosophy books and watch podcasts about it and do podcasts about it and make videos about it and stuff, and I can tell he doesn't fucking understand like Hegel's phenomenology of spirit, and he was like, "Oh, so you're a Hobbesian in terms of human nature."
Yeah, there was a lot of that, and I've got to admit this was kind of the secondary agenda for the debate. That since I've been seeing him do that stuff for a long time, like even back on the Michael Brooks show, I remember watch like a clip of him talking about Plato and Aristotle, and it was just it was pretty strange, and so it's been clear for a while this is something that he really likes to do. He really wants to like this sort of, I guess it's like not an uncommon strategy for conservatives, but like it's a particularly extreme.
Like how Ben Shapiro is the cool kids philosopher.
No, that's right. I was actually just looking back at Ben's book, The Right Side of History: How Reason and Moral Purpose Made the West Great, which unfortunately I have read, and looking at some of the stuff they says about philosophy in that book, which is very Kirk-like in some ways, but yeah, no, totally right. I think Ben Shapiro does this stuff. Kirk does a lot, and Kirk probably does it in a clumsier way, but like there's a certain kind of conservative, often young conservative, who really wants to like. They really want to be like a great books guy, that he's gonna like drop all these like references, Plato and Aristotle and Locke and Rousseau and Hegel and all this stuff, to sort of give this veneer of like intellectual sophistication to what he's doing, and he it's also does these things where he's like he'll have these like memorized phrases of from like whatever, the Federalist Papers or Thomas Jefferson or something, and like and he's got like and he does like there's something in particular that I noticed him doing, because obviously in prepping for this I watched like a few of his old debates, and there were like basically every time he's arguing with somebody and they say something about the social contract, He always says, there is no
Oh,
social
yeah.
contract. Our rights come from God. and I really wanted to. I was really hoping that he would just do that at some point over the course of the debate, so I could like push him on that, like what that means. But he didn't, so like I just kind of had to wedge it in at the end. It's like, hey, I have a question, something I was really, really curious about, because I've seen you say this a couple times. I was hoping it'd just come up organically, but yeah, like it's so weird. Like last time we were talking about James Lindsey, and I think maybe Lindsey is like partially responsible for this, because like conservatives.
The young Hegelian thing about Marx.
Yeah. That like this is a weird thing. Like I do not remember conservatives being this obsessed with Hegel 5 years ago. This seems new, and it's weird because it's like they've decided, like Kirk kept bringing up Hegel like even earlier, but like then like we got like it came up a lot, like in a big way at like the sort of beginning of the second half when he he asked me about Marx, and I kind of said, well, okay, obviously, I'm not going to just like dogmatically say that Marx didn't get anything wrong, there's nothing that needs to be revised, but I positive view, and I started to say I think the theory of history is basically right. His like face lit up. I was like, all right, well, you got something to say, right? What's let's have it. He's like, oh well, the theory of history. So basically, you mean Hegel's, right? It's no. But
that's like that's the exact part of Hegel that Marx turned down its head that he liked the least, isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly, right. I mean, like that like he starts out as a Hegelian, but like that's exactly in going from being a Hegelian to being a Marxist, right? I mean, that's what Marx is reacting against, is the idealist theory of history, and it turned on its head to have the materialist theory of history. So like that's weird in itself. Like it's because like this is not exactly a deep cut, right? I mean, this is something that I think like the first like page of the Wikipedia entry, like like you should I hope, right, get out of that, right, that like Hegel's an idealist, Marx is a materialist, but also I mean, I guess the other thing that seems bizarre about it to me is that like the own seems like it's the opposite direction from what you think it would be, like because if anything, you'd think that from a conservative perspective, it would be like Hegel's bad because he led to Marx, not like Marx is bad because like, because it's really just this evil Hegelianism. Like that's so weird to me. And this is, again, I don't know if this is James Lindsey's doing or what it is, but yeah, like the fact that somebody like Charlie Kirk has this obsession now with Hegel of all, like as the root of all evil is just really strange to me.
Yeah, I feel like he got that from James Lindsey because he's the one who's been demonizing him the most lately, I would say.
Yeah.
James Lindsey should debate Slavoj Žižek about Hegel. That would be epic.
Yeah, no, that would be fun. By the way, I should say, let me see if I can find this now. Yeah, here we go. Lindsey is getting here. Let me put it. I put it a tweet in the private chat. This is something he tweeted last night. He's getting stranger.
Let me just load this here. So in his Twitter profile, it says not New York Times bestselling author. That's funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Among their, actually, I think I can probably screen share this.
Yeah.
Do that. Okay, there we go. Can you see that?
Oh yeah, now I do. Yep.
Okay. Among their objectives, destabilize the U.S. enough to say that we're too out of control not to be managed by world government, using our nuclear arsenal as the excuse. What? Too dangerous in a volatile nation undergoing so much tumult or national divorce. Peacekeeping forces step in. I don't even understand what he's saying. This seems really incoherent to me.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like, this is like something that like some Michigan militia guy on like a shortwave radio, broadcast in like 1995 would have been ranting about, like the New World Order and the black helicopters. And,
black helicopters.
And it's like almost getting to the point where I feel bad making fun of him, because this like is starting to feel like mental illness, but like also like this is a super influential guy on the right now. I mean, he's been on Fox News a ton.
Is this more of the Sovietization of America from the critical race theorists? Like, well, yeah, but they want to let off a nuclear bomb on America or something. Like, I don't get that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because it's like I've heard Lindsey say things that would suggest that, like, oh, all that like Sovietization stuff, he has this mode where he'll sort of make it sound like that's just a metaphor, and like, that's just like his like cranky way of saying that, like, I don't know, elites are unaccountable or something like that. But like, then he tweets shit like this. It's like, okay, like this just seems to be this literal, like, extremely deranged conspiracy theory stuff. And it's like, this guy has testified before like legislative committees and stuff. Like there are laws that have been passed, about what you can and can't teach in schools that are partially based on what he's recommended. And this is, I don't know. I mean, it just seems like if he's gone this far off the deep end, that should get a little bit more attention.
And I'm sure you're just as aware as I am of videos that people have made making fun of people who are mad about critical race theory but can't define it. They don't even use like James Lindsay's description of it. It's what, like, because I just don't understand. Like, it seems like he's kind of like cherry picking the most extreme fringe versions of everything and then combining them all together like it's this massive evil coherent ideology that's going to turn America into communist Russia.
No, I think that's exactly what he's doing. I mean, like, because it's so. I mean, I guess that's part of what makes it, like, effective as a bogeyman, because it's such a moving target, right? Like, what are we talking about here? Is it like actual critical race theory, like Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw? Is it like anything that's Is it like anything that feels too social justicey that like makes it into schools? Is it like even just like, any kind of like anything that's taught in schools that like makes America look bad, right? And it seems like depending on who's talking and when, it could be all three. And like, I mean, if it's the second thing, it's not that they can't come up with some like crazy, cringy examples. They certainly can. It's just that like the connection between these things is really unclear, and it's such a like crazy, heavy-handed response to say like, here's the we're gonna like pass a new law and say that if like you reference any of the following like 20 concepts, in class, you can get fired. Like you can just look. I mean, if there are people, if there are cases where like, I don't know, a lot of the things they point to are actually literally not in classrooms. They're in like some like teacher training presentation or things like that. But like, I mean, some of the individual things they mention, it's like, yeah, okay. I mean, if you could find that, in a classroom, and I'm sure you can somewhere, right? Like a little bit, right? Like then, like I'm against it, but like this is just such a disproportionate panic, for that. It's like, I mean, it just feels to, I don't know. I mean, it just feels to me like
I had basically a kind of, you could call it a wokeness indoctrination class in one of my small local college classes. It was my teacher it was supposedly social studies, but I went into it because I thought, this sounds like the social justice activism indoctrination stuff, but I want to see if they know what they're talking about. And it didn't seem like they did. Like, their every day was, okay, we're going to talk about the importance of racism, and we're also going to talk about Marxism, and we're going to talk about fat phobia and sexism and discrimination every single day, which doesn't really seem like that's all that sociology is. But it's not like, it wasn't this coherent ideology of let's take all of these really specific tenets rather, and everyone across the board agrees on all of this stuff, and we have the same agenda, bro, and we want to destroy America.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, like, I get, like, I mean, this is like a college class you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sure, right? I mean, I think
I don't think it's happening really, like you were saying. I don't really think it's really happening in like elementary schools or high schools or things. Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I mean, again, if, like, a lot of times when pressed, what they'll say is like, okay, strictly speaking, it's not critical race theory, but there's stuff that's like somewhat influenced by critical race theory, or that reminds us of critical race theory, that's like filtered down to like some sort of K-12 classroom somewhere. And I guess just like, I don't know, maybe a little, but like, we want to take that case by case. And also, I don't know. I mean, I think that, like, if you want to know, like, what may, by the time they actually get around to like writing laws about it, like there'll be this like huge sweeping things about it'll practically say like, you can't teach American history in ways that make us feel bad, like.
Yeah. Like, especially if that sort of thing is coming from Ben Shapiro, it's like, what happened to facts don't care about your feelings? It makes you feel uncomfortable.
No, exactly. And I think that, I think high school, I don't know, like I would trust, look, some high school teachers, are just crazy, and, and they'll have weird, like, obsessions, and, those will like come out of class. I'm certainly, I can remember some of that, but like, but overall, right, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm just like, I guess I would just trust a history teacher. Like, I just trust any random history teacher to know what makes a good history class more than I would trust, like, like some like state, like some like, state of Arizona or whatever level bureaucrat, who's like charged with like making sure that none of the makes America look bad stuff, has made it in there. And it just seems like, all I can think is like, this just, again, can you find ways, like, like cherry-picked examples of things that like really are like cringy or excessive or just like generally bad, right? They're made to classroom somewhere, sure. But like, overall, this stuff always just makes me think of like, how is this different? Like it just feels like, some like 19, I don't know, like PTA meeting in 1975 where there's like a church lady screaming about how Led Zeppelin records, played backwards have, messages about Satan in them, like it just doesn't feel that different from that to me.
Yeah. Or, just say no to drugs. And we're going to put these parental advisory explicit lyrics warnings on all the music now.
No, that's the thing. I mean, it just seems
that's like that was like trigger warnings before they were called trigger warnings.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting too, because like Tipper Gore was like, she's a Democrat, and like some of what she's objected to was about sexism, and but like also it was like definitely in alliance with the kind of like, like there was a lot of that stuff was supposed to appeal to like evangelical parents who like, don't want their kids to be exposed to the existence of sex.
Yeah, definitely. Gotta just say no to sex too. Say no to sex and drugs. And if you're a teenager, don't have any fun, which de facto kind of means that you will have fun anyway, but you'll probably do something stupid because you don't know what you're fucking doing.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah. So it seemed like you mentioned earlier that you kind of had had more of an agenda in mind would that be kind of the I guess kind of the economic message that it seems like you were trying to promote?
Yeah, so I think that in I think in the case of this debate, like the main thing that I wanted to do was to kind of like play up the contradiction between the populist rhetoric and the just standard Republican, kind of economic policies, and give him a hard time about that. That was like the main thing I wanted to do. And then like the secondary thing is to, frankly, just kind of like poke a couple holes in like the philosophy references.
Yeah. Like the one we mentioned before, like about how, did you know that Marx was a young Hegelian? Well, yeah. He started off as a young Hegelian, but then he was no longer a young Hegelian.
Yeah. I think he said he was the president of the young Hegelians. I don't actually know what that means, but whatever. Like did the young Hegelians
I didn't even know there was
have
one.
a president? Like, is there a structure where they can elect a leader? This is all news to me, but whatever. Yeah. No, exactly. Like the Hegel Marx thing, or he was doing this. Yeah, the one you mentioned earlier, the Hobbesian thing was and also Rousseau, right? He's really like
he called you a Rousseauian, and he said he's a Hobbesian, something like that, in terms of human nature.
Not exactly, but I think he was like but like I think that those are so I think like somehow or another the Charlie Kirk worldview, like those are the bad guys, right? Or like Rousseau, Hegel, and Marx. And then I guess maybe also Hobbes, but like but like those are the main ones, those first three. And then he was trying to, it was this weird thing too, because like when the Hobbesian thing came up, it was in the context of him like asking me like what my view was of human nature. And like that was a really strange like interlude, because it sort of felt like, I mean, honestly, it just kind of felt like he was looking for something that could like fit on a bumper sticker. Like, it's like what's the, what's human nature? It's like, well, I mean, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to sound like too much of an asshole about this, but like, that's really complicated. I don't know how. I don't know how to answer that in 30 seconds.
It sounded like he was trying to set up this binary, like, I think the idea seems to be, humans are either naturally inherently good or naturally inherently bad. But like in reality, we're kind of neither or both, depending on how you look at it. Kind of like, it's not like anyone is a totally good person or anyone is a totally bad person, but that doesn't mean that you have to be like, or relativistic about it and say that like goodness and badness are the same thing. They're differences, but they're not like black and white labels.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yes, it's neither, it's both, like there are, there's, there are ways that, people are to some extent under some circumstances, kind and cooperative and all that stuff. There are ways that under some circumstances and to some extent, people are, selfish and cruel and, and all that stuff. And it's always going to be some like messy, unpredictable mixture. I mean, I think that like, I would imagine that his view is, I mean, like, I think, we never quite got around to him saying what he thought, but I would imagine that the punchline has got to be something, like something super Christian, that like, we're, either something about, how we're sinners, or like, or I don't know, like at least some sort of like, even though he's an evangelical Protestant, like he sort of, when he talks about this stuff, he kind of like talks like a old school, like Catholic scholastic, like he'll even like,
oh wow.
Because
I didn't know he was a Protestant. Yeah, he doesn't sound that way.
No,
he
doesn't sound that way at all.
Whoa.
But he is, right.
Yeah.
Because he'll bring up like Aristotle and Aquinas and Augustine and all this stuff, and like he'll say all these like very, very Catholic sounding things, which is what makes it confusing. But
that reminded me of your what you were saying about it in terms of the social contract and whether rights come from God because they're just, or whether rights are just because they come from God. And then he said something like, "Why not both?" And I think I sent you a message a while ago. I think I said something like, "That's kind of like Trump saying, listen, I have a big dick because I say so, okay? And I have a big dick because I say so. No, and I say so because I have a big dick."
No, it's that was the weirdest part that he because I'd seen him say that so many times before. There's no social contract, or rights come from God. Like, I really wanted to push him on that because like it just seems like for a guy who's always bringing up Plato for some reason, like that the problem with that, right, like comes from Plato. The Euthyphro dilemma, right, is the if you say that the holy is that which the gods loved, the gods love it because it's holy, or is it holy because the gods love it? So like translated to this is do we have these rights? Would it be unjust to violate these rights because God wants us to have them, or does God want us to have them because it'd be unjust to violate them? And that's where he said both, which was really strange answer. And it sort of seemed like he didn't understand the question. And then there was a point where it seemed like he did understand the question. He was still saying both. And then like finally we got to a point where I think he like understood it for real, and he was just kind of like declined to answer, right? Like he did this thing where he what did he say? Because like the problem, like the reason this is a dilemma for views like that is that there are, like there's a kind of crazy bullet you have to bite, no matter which one you like. Like in other words, if you say, if you say that God wants us to have them because it'd be unjust if we didn't have them, then whatever reason it would be unjust has to be something that has nothing to do with God, right? Because it's like, like if God wants us to have them because it'd be unjust if we did it, then it must be unjust for some reason other than God wanted it, and whatever that other reason is just as available to the atheist or the agnostic. But if you say, God, it would be unjust for us not to have them because God wants us to have them, then the crazy consequence is like, well, okay, so if God had decreed that I don't know, that like apartheid was just, or or that that like the Taliban shooting little girls who wanted to learn how to read is just, then like those things would be just, and which is the point, or like you could say like if and there was a minute there where he seemed to just be like biting the bullet on that and be like, okay, well, theoretically, if God wanted it, but then I think he did finally see the problem, and then he was just like, no, I'm not going to play. Like, like I don't, like he said, what did he say? He was just like, well, I reject the premise. It's like, yeah, but I mean, it's an if question, right? Like it's not really about accepting or rejecting the premise. The question is like, given your view in this hypothetical, would you then say that would be just? And he just kind of didn't, didn't want to say.
Yeah. I would have respected him more if he had just said, well, I have faith that the rights are just because they come from God, and I have faith in God. That's one difference between my views on people who like Christians now, and how it differs from when I used to be a militant atheist. Because now, if someone believes in God because they have faith, I think, well, I just don't have your faith. And if it makes your life better and I don't have it, but it helps you and you do have that faith, then that's probably a good thing. We don't have to agree.
Sure.
Yeah. So I would have respected him more if he had said that, instead of kind of like fumbling and almost dodging the question whether intentionally or not intentionally. So what were other than what we discussed, were there any other kind of major highlights for you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess probably the biggest one, besides the ones that we've talked about, would be the end of the top half, when he spent like a good 2 minutes sort of going back and forth with himself about whether he'd be willing to raise Jeff Bezos' taxes by 1% if that could be used to house every single homeless veteran. And and it's like, all right, if this is, again, if anybody's watching this who takes like the populist branded seriously, like the fact that this is such a hard question for him, like that just seems like that should be pretty decisive.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking, especially since you're talking about 1%, you're not talking about taking away 90% of his money or anything.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Yeah, and I like the way you made that point too, because you said something like, I think we probably established at this point that he's not going to do that voluntarily, because you mentioned that he had said in a previous debate that he would hope that Jeff Bezos would give away that money voluntarily, but now he's gone to space, so it seems pretty clear that he won't do it voluntarily. I'm curious about what your opinion is on this, because I'm not sure whether I've heard you talk about it before, because there's some lefties who think that billionaires shouldn't exist, and I'm wondering what you think about that, because I personally think that people should be allowed to make. I don't know where I don't really have any idea where I would draw the line, but I think that billionaires should be allowed to exist, but they should pay way more taxes than they do, and they basically de facto pays almost no taxes most of the time, which is kind of fucked up, because they should pay proportionally more taxes than other people who make way less money.
Yeah. So I guess one thing I'd point out about this is that it is incredibly difficult, almost impossible, to make it up to the point of being a billionaire just by
meritocracy.
Well, not just that, but like the kind of, like, when we think about like people who are like really rich, in the ordinary sense of really rich, who got really rich from like, writing a book that sold 1 million copies, or, having, being like a crazy successful rock star, things like that. Like, it is just about impossible to make it up to the point of being a billionaire by doing stuff like that. Like, I think J.K. Rowling maybe was up there at one point, although even there, I think that's not really from book sales. That like a lot of that was like sort of secondary intellectual property, coming out of that.
Like movies and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like movie rights and the toys and all that stuff, right? That like, but again, so J.K. Rowling maybe was there at one point, but like Stephen King isn't a billionaire. Mick Jagger isn't a billionaire. Like the people we think of as just like insanely successful within those fields. They don't have $1 billion. It's incredibly difficult to have $1 billion, right? Like if I, think about. Well, here, let me see if I can remember this. Probably can't off the top of my head, but so all right. Let's see, just a second. So, all right, good. So times 1. Yeah. All right. So let's see. So just to put this in perspective, just had to run the numbers really quickly to make sure I didn't mess this up. But imagine that Christopher Columbus, I don't know, he was a vampire or something, so he could like live for hundreds and hundreds of years, and every day, starting with the day that he landed in the New World in 1492. He earned $1,000 a day. So 1492 to the present, 1492 to 2021, every single day, 365 days a year, he'd earned $1,000 a day. He would be nowhere close to being a billionaire today. Like,
oh wow,
okay. Not even close. He would have. Since I just ran it through the computer calculator, so he would have $193 million in change. So that's again, very rich by normal people standards, but like that's like less than 1/5 of $1 billion. It like, I mean, sometimes I think part of the problem is that, million and billion rhyme, that like it's almost it's almost the same word. So that like, and because we can't really conceptualize either one, like it just sort of like all runs together. It's like, oh yeah, so it's like there's a million, and then you get like a little bit bigger, and it's $1 billion. But it's like, this is just an insanely large amount of money, $1 billion. And if somebody does make it up to that, just by being like such a successful, author, rock star, or whatever, then I mean, whatever, as you say, right? They should have to give back a giant chunk of it, in taxes, but like, exactly how much, I guess we could argue about it. It's hard to just sort of settle that a priori, but like, I guess the bigger point that I would make about the should billionaires exist question is like what the existence of billionaires says about the economic system that gives rise to them. Because, if you, if you think about like economic inequality, like, all right, I think that even in like a socialist society where, you have like everything, all of the economic enterprises, all the businesses, or all the businesses of a certain size, maybe, whatever, I think if you, I think if you like hire a couple people part-time to, to do like, web design and, stuff like that, like you shouldn't necessarily have to, form a cooperative with them, but like, like all of the, but all of the businesses of a decent size, say, right, we're either state-owned or worker-owned or some combination of the two, right? Like that. So like a fully socialist society of the kind that, whatever, God willing, the 22nd century or something, we could have, like, even in that society, there'd be some economic inequality, right? I mean, because like not for all sorts of reasons, right? Like that.
That's an important point, because a lot of conservatives say that lefties want there to be equal proportionality for everyone in all aspects of society. But if you actually like listen to like people like you or like and any number of other people, I never actually hear anyone advocating for that.
Yeah. Have you seen the Martin Scorsese movie Casino?
Yeah.
Okay. So you remember the Scenic Casino it's basically to establish that, you know, De Niro's character Ace Rothstein has like lost it. They're and like showing like how intensely he's trying to micromanage everything at the casino, and like he's sitting at one of the like restaurant tables, and you know, there are like a couple of blueberry muffins that are open, and he goes nuts because one of the muffins has more blueberries in it than the other one, and he like storms back to the kitchen and, you know, demands, you know, exactly as many blueberries in every muffin. And the cook is like, do you have any idea how long that would take to, you know, make sure there's exactly, you know, like, it's like, that's the impression that I get sometimes, like listening to like Jordan Peterson types talk about this stuff, that like that socialists think that, you know, that like we should have this like some sort of like all powerful bureaucracy to make sure that in some sort of crazy, you know, exactly as many blueberries in every muffin sort of way, everybody has exactly the same resources as everybody else. And I think honestly,
sorry that like that was making me think about was, I don't remember whether you went over this on your show or not, but yeah, you're probably familiar with it. That thing with Barry Weiss going on MSNBC or CNN and saying something like the world's gone mad, and one of her examples was, you can't say that men and women are different. And like, who is saying that? I don't see anyone saying that.
Well, and it's also like, I think that's also incredibly vague, right? Like, what is that? Like there's some, I mean, I think there's a little bit of a Maud and Bailey thing going on in that example, because it's like, are men and women different? Like, sure. I mean, in some ways, definitely, right? I mean, that you know, like, you know, that estrogen and testosterone are different, you know, being able to, you know, give birth, not, you know, these are all important human differences, but they're not the kind of differences anybody will get mad at you if you say, right? Like the kind of differences, like, you know, the kind of differences that are actually like controversial are like, you know, I don't know, you know, men
shouldn't wear dresses.
Yeah. Like either you're saying that there should be strict gender roles, or you're saying that like there are differences of like intelligence or leadership abilities or something like that. Those are like controversial difference claims. But just because people are getting mad about that doesn't mean that they think that there are literally no differences, you know, between men and women. And yeah, so I think that in this case too, right? Like, okay, in that like hypothetical, you know, 22nd century kind of system that I just described, you know, you are for sure going to get a certain degree of economic inequality, because like, you know, people are doing different things with their lives, and, you know, and even with like a lot of redistribution or whatever, those are going to have different, you know, effects. And even within like a worker owned like cooperative business, you know, you are going to get some income differences, because like you might either have to, you know, incentivize people to like, you know, if there are certain jobs that you need to have like gone to school for a certain number of years to do, you know, it might be that you need to pay people more to incentivize people to like spend those extra years in school to do it. Or on the other end,
that's another thing that people like, that I've heard you make that sort of claim before in other like other lefties, and that's like another straw man that I hear from conservatives sometimes. Like, oh, if you're for worker co-ops, you're it's similar to that. You're a hypocrite if you make any profit from your YouTube channel. Like, if you don't have equal distribution of all your resources in your YouTube channel and you advocate for worker co-ops, that means you're a fraud.
Yeah. No, exactly. And like, and you could have, and you could have income inequality at the other end too, right? Because if, like, you know, if we had a society that was enough more equal overall, that nobody was going to take the worst jobs just out of desperation, you know, because it was like that, or just like total poverty, then you might actually have to pay people more to do some of the worst, like dirtiest, most undesirable jobs, you know, which would kind of be the opposite of the way our society works. But in any case, like, so those are all reasons why you might get some degree of income inequality even within a single co-op. But that's only really realistically, that's only going to be an inequality within a certain range, right? Like, you know, you don't, like, if you need to pay some people a little bit more than others to, because they have certain responsibilities that they're not going to take on without that, or, because it's like a particularly dirty job, or because of like any number of other reasons. Like in Mondragon, right, the largest worker co-op that exists right now in the world in Spain, I think the maximum pay difference between like the highest paid executive at Mondragon and like the lowest paid worker is like 11-1. And that's even when they're like competing with like regular capitalist companies. I think in an economic environment where every company was organized like Mondragon, probably be a lot less than that. But like, regardless, let's say it was 11-1 forever, right? Like, okay, like, but that's compared to like hundreds to one in the rest of the economy. And you're not going to get like, even if you have to, pay some people a little bit more than others for different kinds of incentives, you're not going to get like these kinds of crazy differences where like people, like you're not going to get the kind of income different, like inequality that you get between like Jeff Bezos and people who, work in warehouses. Because if the people in the warehouses get to vote on the pay scales, you might be able to convince them to vote for pay scales that are like a little unequal. Because like, you could sort of show them that you need to do this in order to get people to do certain jobs or whatever. But like, you're not going to get them to, vote for one that's so unequal that like, the people at the top end can buy their own spaceships. Or
like after the 2008 stock market crash, we're going to put caps on the bonuses, but they're still going to get bonuses.
Yeah, right. Like, and of course, even though the bonuses are like a tiny, tiny fraction of like what they're paying to the bailouts, it still feels like kind of insult to injury, right? It's like we're gonna go with like our hands out that like you have to you have to pay us, you have to bail us out, after we fucked everything up, that profits are private, but the losses are going to be social. But sorry, we're too big to fail. The effects could be too bad on the rest of the economy if you don't bail us out. But then also we're going to spend some of it on giving executives crazy bonuses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So before you go, we should talk about cancel culture and that the recent stuff with Dave Chappelle and R. Kelly. I haven't heard you talk about the R. Kelly one yet, but I guess whichever one of those you want to talk about first. I saw your episode where you talked with a few other people about the Dave Chappelle thing, and the one part of it that I liked was I forget the specific example, but I think like what you said in that part was something like, I think it seems pretty clear in that context that he was talking about comedians, because he was talking about like his tribe, and I think it was pretty clear to me in that part that he was kind of putting himself in the tribe of comedians for his group in that too. And like in terms of the and in terms of the transphobia stuff, like people accusing him of being transphobic after watching that special, like it really pisses me off, because to me, it seemed like the only serious part of that special was when he told the story about his transgender comedian friend who he was mentoring and giving spots to whenever he was in town, who killed herself, probably in large part to the online Twitter mob telling her to kill herself or that they would kill her and stuff like that. Like, to think that he's transphobic after that just boggles my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of, it's kind of funny pairing those two, R. Kelly and Dave Chappelle, since, honestly, since I never listened to R. Kelly's music. So like,
I never really did either.
My only association with him is the old Chappelle Show skits about him. I mean, look, I think, the R. Kelly thing, I think is probably more straightforward, because like, this is this sort of weird thing that happens sometimes when like you complain about, cancel culture. People say, well, people who should be canceled, and then they'll list off like the worst people they can think of. And it's like, I mean, I don't know what that means though. Like, he should be in prison, but like, does that mean that like nobody should ever listen to his music? I don't see why not. Like, as a, you know,
that's kind of my take on it. Like I've never really been a big fan of his music, but if people want to listen to his music, who's that gonna harm? It's not like the songs are gonna go around raping people.
Right.
Like, some people like his music. They should be allowed to like his music. Like, to me, his music has little to nothing to do with the crimes he committed.
No, exactly. You know, and I think that, like, I don't know, there's this weird moralism about like supporting people or whatever. It's like, I guess I've never really understood the idea that you should like punish the bad people by like denying them the, you know, the 50 cents of income or whatever they'll get from, you know, you're buying, you know, an album, or, you know, like it just seems like, look, if people really deserve to be punished, that's like such a weird, petty, like, you know, you know, what's that going to do? Right. Like, and I don't know. I guess just on some fundamental level, I just don't get that mindset. You know, I mean, I think like, I think R. Kelly should be in prison if he, you know, if he wants to, you know, if he wants to record music in prison, you know, I'm fine with that too. You know, I would like maybe, you know, maybe his victims could like sue him for like a piece of the proceeds or something. But like, you know, that's fine with me. I mean, as far as Dave Chappelle goes, you know, I mean, I'm not going to defend every single individual thing that he says in the special, or, you know, or say that there's no like legitimate criticism of any of it. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that I think the portrayal of it, like the way that it was portrayed, certainly on Twitter, but like also in a lot of like media accounts, versus what the actual tone of the special was just night and day. Like it was
yeah,
just,
of course.
You know, it was just being depicted as if it were just this like gleefully edgelordish like festival of transphobia. And then like we actually watch it, it's like, no, he's like in that last part where, as you say, it's like the most serious part, you know, like he's doing he's telling the story about his evolution on this issue and what his friendship with this woman meant to him, and how, you know, I mean, he's doing a lot of on the one hand, on the other hand stuff to sort of like work through his mixed feelings about it. So of course, if you just quote some of that, right, it's going to give a really misleading impression. But like, he also, like, everybody quotes the like, I'm on team turf. And it's like, well, that comes about 30 seconds after he says, I don't know what a turf is. And it comes about 2 minutes before he says, I'm not saying trans women aren't women, which, you know, the whole point of being a turf is to not say that. So, and then like, but like, this is all like kind of nitpicking. Like, the biggest thing is, again, just the tone is so completely different from the impression that you get from this stuff. I mean, literally, like, the last thing, you know, one of the last things that comes out of his mouth in the entire special is like, okay, I've said my piece. I'm not going to tell any more jokes about this subject until I'm sure that we're all laughing together. And it's like, this is so hilariously far from how it's being depicted. It's just kind of unbelievable. And yeah, I mean, I just fundamentally don't get it, I guess. I think that, and like, it's frustrating. I know that when I say that, like, I know the response is going to be, well, you don't get it because you're not trans, and so you don't understand, you know, the transphobia and why this is a big deal. It's like, okay, but like, I have also seen trans people say that they thought that the special was both hilarious and touching, right? Like that also is a reaction that exists. You know, like, trans people are not a hive mind, right? You know, like different trans people are going to feel differently, you know.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the small number of trans people who I have met in my out of the small number of trans people who I've met in my life, like, not a single one of them seems like the least bit supportive of any of this kind of woke shit.
Like, yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Because again, like any other, you know, I mean, just because you have this you know, gender identity that like differs from your birth sex, that doesn't by itself tell us almost anything about who you are, how you feel about anything, or how you know, what your politics are, what your cultural sensibilities are. it's like this weird essentializing thing that we do where like every member of every oppressed group, is just like part of like a Borg, of that oppressed group. It's like, it's really not how it works. It's like, it's like Tori Reid's point about how, there are more Black people in the United States than there are people in Canada. And nobody would ever talk about like what the Canadian point of view about something was. It's like
that's
like,
true.
well, what do the Canadians think? Like because we understand that it's a complex society divided into economic classes and different ideologies and different personalities and all that stuff. And it's like, but somehow we talk about it as if there was like a Black perspective.
Yeah, of course.
The Nicole Hannah-Jones thing where she actually said, because this is the kind of weird shit that you have to say if you want to try to make sense of that like, well, there's a difference between being racially Black and being politically Black, that like, I guess being politically Black. I guess
you're not a real Black person if you don't have the right politics.
No, exactly. I guess being politically Black means you agree with Nicole Hannah-Jones, which, it's just such a weird, like degrading, way to talk about people. And I think in this case, it feels particularly, tone deaf to me, not because like, again, if you want to like object to particular things that he said or whatever, like I could probably get behind some of that, but like, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just hear this stuff, think like, what is your impression of what American society is generally like on this stuff? Because like, maybe I'm just too pessimistic, but it seems to me that like there's probably a good half of the American public that's way worse than Dave Chappelle is on these issues. And if that's true, like, I guess I just think that I guess I just fundamentally don't buy the premise that watching the special is going to make anybody more transphobic instead of less.
Yeah. And I think it's ridiculous that like they put laser focus into the transgender thing too, whereas like he was making fun of everyone. He was making fun of feminism. He said something like, I think feminism needs a male leader, and I will be that leader if you suck my dick. Like, what happened to being mad about that joke?
No, well, which is actually kind of funny because this sort of took the wind out of the sails of everything else. That's like, it sort of overwhelmed everything else people might have gotten mad about, because it's like, yeah, that joke, space Jews, in a way, it's actually really shocking that like more people did get mad about that one. Like that was like kind of a
footnote, or like tenderizing that lesbian woman's titties, right?
He whooped the toxic masculinity out of her. Which made me laugh. But no, exactly. Like there's, I mean, obviously he's not the kind of comedian who's gonna like gingerly, pick his words to like try to avoid, offending people. It's going to be kind of the opposite of that. But like, again, if you want to, see what the overall feel of like what he's trying to express about this is, it's just not summarized by any of these summaries. And I guess like also, maybe last comment about the Chappelle thing, like, the thing that I found the funniest and sort of frustrating way is that there were all of these mainstream media sources that made this huge deal, like for, I don't know, days, weeks, about how there was going to be this walkout of, trans employees at Netflix to like protest the Chappelle special. And they played this thing up so hard. And then it's like, all right, well, there was this, it's unclear how many of these people even walked out, because there was like a rally and they said, trans Netflix employees, they're allies. So it's not even clear how many people at the rally were even Netflix employees. And like originally they were saying it was going to be like thousands, and then it was dozens. Like that was what they ultimately said. There were dozens of people at this rally. And it's like, okay. And the reason that I find that so kind of, darkly funny is not that like I think anybody who anybody who did take offense, at it, who's trans, that like I necessarily think that they're wrong to feel the way they feel or whatever. Obviously I've gone through experiences that I haven't, and I, respect that, but like, and also some of this is just a matter of personal sensibility, but like that walkout got all this attention, even though it ended up being like microscopic. But like all of the thousands of workers at like John Deere and all these other places who have gone out on strike over just regular economic union stuff have gotten like a fraction of the attention that like the possibly as many as dozens of Netflix employees walking out have, because the Netflix thing fits into this established culture war narrative, that like, so that's like something that they like, that like the media kind of has an angle on, whereas just like workers who don't like their pay or conditions, or two-tier contracts, or think that like just like they've been kind of sick of things for a long time, and now that there's a labor shortage, they have some bargaining power, so they're going to use it. Like, that's not sexy in the same way, so that's going to get like a fraction of the coverage. Oh, you're muted, Andrew.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, because it, like you said, it's not as sexy, and it's like it's not as interesting or offensive, and they get like, I mostly learned about that kind of stuff and other strikes from following lefty YouTube shows like yours, and I think I learned the most about the John Deere strike from the Crystal Kyle and Friends podcast. They had a guy who was reporting on it, and that they went into detail about that. So yeah, it's like all the shows, like all of your guys are filling in the gaps of those, and yeah, like stuff like that has way more mainstream support, like you said, isn't being covered by mainstream media, and these tiny little events that are just all the rage on Twitter are being overplayed like motherfuckers, and it's like acting like it's way bigger than what it actually is in reality in comparison.
Yeah. Oh, well, hey, thanks for having me on again. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks for talking with me, man. Yeah. So yeah, like I said before, I'd love to do maybe a deep dive on Kant next time, if that would be cool with you.
Yeah.
And I know you're writing a book on Christopher Hitchens. I've seen you talking about that too. It'd be cool to talk about that at some point once your book is out too, because I think I might have mentioned briefly before that I used to be a militant atheist, so yeah. I used to be like a big fan of all of those guys, and then I eventually learned the error of my ways, and probably like most people, I'm much more familiar with Christopher Hitchens' militant atheist stuff. Most of what I learned from his kind of socialist days are what the clips that I've seen you gone through on your channel. So that's I'd love to talk about that too once your book comes out on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe in I don't know, like a month or so, something like that. Do you want to do that deep dive into Kant?
Sure, sounds fun.
All right, cool. Thanks, man. All right, so thanks everyone for watching. If you found this as interesting as we did, and yeah, watch Dave Chappelle's comedy special. It's not as dangerous as you think it is, and listen to R. Kelly if you want to, and also, of course, check out Ben's debate with Charlie Kirk. It's really awesome. And like I always say, thanks for subscribe. Please subscribe, click the like button, click the bell to be notified when I come out with more videos. I think this weekend, my fantasy nerd friends, Dusty and Tristram, we're going to talk about the book Mistborn Secret History by Brandon Sanderson. So look forward to that. And also this weekend, I'm going to talk to Jared Bauer from Wisecrack again. He is a huge Nicolas Cage fan, and I know he's a very hated actor. So we're going to talk about Jared's favorite Nicolas Cage movie called Vampire's Kiss from 1988. So that'll be happening this weekend too. So look forward to that. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And Dave Chappelle is awesome. And check out Ben Burgis's channel at Ben Burgis. Give them an argument, and check out his books like Canceling Comedians While the World Burns, and the upcoming one about Christopher Hitchens, as well as at least a few others too, I think, right? And yeah, anything else to say before we end it there?
Sounds pretty complete to me.
All right. Thanks a lot for talking again, man. And thanks again, everyone, for watching again. And adios until next.